I've never met a single politician who goes into Parliament intending to become sort of mad and toxic. They all go in with really good intentions, but you might as well be walking into Chernobyl. It's, you cannot escape the radiation. It is just very toxic.
Were you a bit seduced by
the
court of the Camerons?
So glamorous and fabulous, yes. I mean, Dave was like a sort of James Bond figure. I used to look at people like Samantha and wish one of them would be my friends. And then when one of them was my friends, I was just really excited.
And desperate not to lose it.
Of course, yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. Does politics make good people awful, or does it attract awful people? It certainly wrecks lives if Sarah Vine's experience is anything to go by. The Daily Mail columnist, who laughs at herself as one of the Wednesday witches of Fleet Street, has written a jaw-dropping book called How Not to Be a Political Wife. It is a funny, sad and self-critical, but also delightfully gossipy memoir of two devastating relationship breakdowns. Her marriage to Tory cabinet minister and Brexiteer Michael Gove, and what she thought was her close friendship with David and Samantha Cameron. And it's an intriguing portrait, not just of that period before and after the Brexit referendum, but of the psychodrama around the people in politics that politicians always deny. Some reviewers have said it's brilliant and they feel enormous sympathy for her. Others say it's embarrassing, from the thinking man's Meghan Markle. Either way, it's got people talking. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So that question that I felt reading it, does politics turn good people bad?
I think it tests them to the limits, is what I would say. It's very, very, very toxic. Politics is just a very toxic world.
I mean, you make it sound absolutely ghastly.
It is. I mean, I haven't, that's not even the half of it. I mean, I've kept stuff out. I mean, you've no idea how unpleasant it is. Well, because,
it's too bad.
Lawyers. But no, it is just really toxic, and it's designed that way. It's the way the whole of Westminster is set up. It's almost impossible to be anything else. So all politicians, I've never met a single politician who goes into Parliament intending to become sort of mad and toxic. They all go in with really good intentions, but it is, you might as well be walking into Chernobyl. It's, you cannot escape the radiation from politics. It is just very toxic.
Because you didn't marry a politician, you married a journalist.
No, I married a journalist. We were both journalists when we got married, yes.
So did you think but he was a political journalist, obviously.
Yes, and he always was interested in politics, yes.
Did you think you knew what you were getting into?
I did, and I realised now I had absolutely no idea, and that I was an absolute idiot and very naive, and also probably quite arrogant, thinking that I could handle it. Do you know what I mean? Thinking I would be okay. It would be different for me. But I always say it's like childbirth. You read all the books, you listen to the podcasts, you look at the mummy influences, but no one can actually tell you what it's like to push a baby out of your vagina. And I think politics is a similar experience. You can read about it, you can think you know what it is, but until you actually do it, you don't realise quite how painful it is. And
do you think it turns? I mean, it's toxic, and but does it turn? Does it change people? No, I mean, not obviously, some people yes, some people no, but I think increasingly it attracts the sort of people who can cope with it. So I think what it does is it's a sort of self-selecting environment, in the sense that if you are a really good, kind person with genuine motives, who's a bit soft and a bit sort of maybe not perfect, but really well-meaning, you're not going to survive. You're not going to get anywhere, because you're just going to get eaten alive. Well, because you'll just get sort of railroaded, or you'll do something completely harmless, but sort of that annoys all the wrong people. It's just very difficult. So what you do is what you end up is you get tough. You need to be quite a tough person to survive in it and to thrive in it. And particularly Michael, my ex-husband, he wasn't that kind of person, really. He didn't have the sort of kind of moves, if you know what I mean. He wasn't one of those people who just kind of sailed through life. He had to kind of work for it. And I think it was a bad environment for him. Didn't suit his personality very well. The headlines have really been about your bust up with Samantha Cameron. Yes. And various things that happened with David Cameron. Yeah. For me, it was about, so in the same way that Michael wasn't in politics when I married him,
the Camerons weren't really in politics when I got to know them. So we all went on that journey together.
Yeah, you were in on the ground floor, weren't you, of the whole Cameron project. Is that why you thought you were safe?
Yes, fool that I am. Yes, absolutely. Because, but what I hadn't understood was that, power changes you, and it changes. It doesn't. It changes the people around you, and they become the gatekeepers. So whereas before like if I was your mate, I'd just ring you up and say, "Would you like to have a drink?" But if you suddenly became prime minister, I wouldn't be able to do that anymore. I'd have to ring up an aide and say, "Hello, can I please have a drink with my?" Do you know what I mean? So there are barriers become erected, and they're there for good reasons. But if you look at it from the other side, it's also why I think politicians sometimes, often, particularly when they're very much at the top of the tree, end up losing contact with reality, because there are so many people in the way of, the old friends, the friends who will say to them, "You're being an idiot," or "That's a silly thing to do," or, "You shouldn't wear that shade of lipstick," or whatever it is that you're, thinking about. So, so I think, that, so the book is a sort of, it is that journey, if you like, from normality to sort of insanity via politics. Do
you think you were ever really friends?
Yes, definitely. I think I was, yes. I mean, I could be deluded, but I do think I was, yes.
So at what point did it turn?
I think it was around sort of 2000 it was after Michael got fired from education, really. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, when David Cameron demoted him because he'd become too controversial.
Yes. So,
he was drawing a lot of heat.
Exactly. So him and Dominic Cummings were working together at the Department of Education. They had a very, quite a sort of punchy reforming agenda, which was what Dave wanted. They were pressing ahead with it, but it was causing some problems. And it was decided that he needed to be sidelined in the run-up to the election. And it all got very messy.
And was it a complete surprise?
Kind of. I mean, it was to me. It might not have been to Michael. You'd have to ask him that.
Because you thought you were close friends and that he wouldn't...
Well, I just thought someone might have a conversation with me about it, I thought someone might say to me, "By the way, we're a bit worried about this, blah, blah, blah." But they didn't. It just was, Michael came home one day and said, "I'm being transferred." So
he was treated like any other...
Sorry, there had been conversations about, jokey conversations about whether or not Michael would make a good chief whip. But they were sort of jokey conversations. They didn't seem to be serious, proper conversations. They were kind of postprandial conversations. Or maybe, I just felt that was, I think if you say if you get somebody to expend their personal and political capital on doing something that you've asked them to do and that you've agreed to do, it's not very good to then just, cut them loose.
So you were furious?
I was quite cross, yes. I mean, I was cross on Michael's behalf, really, because he'd been working very hard. It was kind of, and also it was his passion. Education really was what he wanted to. I always remember him saying, if I'm never anything other than a really good education secretary, that's perfect. This is a great thing. It's a very important role. Securing people's education is key, right? Because it's like the next generation. So if you can get that right, then you can get the country right. Ultimately, it's the future. And
did you think he should have turned it down?
What, education?
The demotion.
Well, he did. He said. So Dave said to him, "I'd like you to be my chief whip." And Michael came home and said, "Dave wants me to be chief. What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you'd be very good at it." And he sort of ummed and ahed and said, "Okay." And then I think he thought about it. And I think he probably had a conversation with Dom Cummings about it as well. And then he said no. And then Dave got very angry with him because,
What happened?
There was a spicy exchange of text messages, I think we can say. Eventually, they agreed that Michael would do this. And then it would be done in a certain way. And it wasn't done nicely. It was done very brutally, actually. And he was sort of humiliated, actually. And I thought that was poor.
And so was that the beginning of...
Well, it was sort of the beginning, I think everything was fine, provided I didn't stand up for myself or for Michael, provided I was sort of smoothing everything over. Do you know what I mean? I'm quite an emollient person I try to keep people happy. I'm a bit of a people pleaser. And then I got cross about it. And then I think that was unexpected because that wasn't how I'd behaved up until then. So I suppose it was probably my fault for suddenly changing the way I was. But I was cross about it. And I did I think it was, in the Daily Mail, Max Hastings wrote a piece. And the headline was, "A shabby day's work that David Cameron would live to regret." Words to that effect, and I retweeted it, and
yes.
then I was in a lot of trouble for that. Yes,
who
bad
with?
Sarah? I would just obviously with the Camerons,
and with Michael as well.
Michael, I think yes, Michael was quite actually cross with me because I think he felt that that was just making things worse.
So what did that say about his loyalties? I mean, where were his loyalties, and at what point do you think politics became the most important thing in his life?
I think when. Funnily enough, I think it was when things started to get hard and started to get difficult, because I think the problem with politics is it's a bit like being a gambler. You go into the casino and you win a few rounds and you think, oh, this is good, I'm on a bit of a winning streak. And then you lose. And then you think, oh, I better keep playing because I need to win back the money that I've lost. And then you end up sort of going back and going back and going back. You just want the win. And I think that became, Michael wanted to fix the mistakes that had been made, and that became a big preoccupation, I think.
And that's why he kept going back.
Even
back. To Theresa May
to Theresa May after she had been very mean to him and told him to go away. And I mean, she did treat him like a naughty schoolboy. I think she treated everyone like a naughty schoolboy, but she was quite harsh on him. And he sort of left. And then the second she sort of, the second politics showed a bit of ankle, metaphorically, if you know what I mean, he was straight back in there. And I found that difficult because I just kept thinking, this is just madness. This is not getting anyone anywhere, really. Mm.
I mean, it's this question of sort of loyalty, I suppose. And at what point, do you think ultimately politics was the most important thing in his life?
In Michael's life?
Yes. Did it come before you and family and everything else?
I don't think, I just think it took up more space. And it's just a bigger thing, politics. It's like I've got two dogs. One is a Labrador and eats entire wheels of cheese when I'm not looking. And the other is a little Lhasa Apso, and she's very easygoing. I love them both equally, but the big dog takes up a lot more of my time, effort, and money. Do you know what I mean? It's just politics is a big thing.
Brexit was, of course, the big breakup.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Now, your position in Brexit is really interesting because you weren't really a Brexiteer, were you?
Not really. No. I mean, I grew up in Italy, so I speak Italian, I speak French, I speak Spanish. I went to Italian schools till I was 15. My brother, my family live in Spain and Italy. I'm Welsh.
Yes.
But I was an immigrant to well, effectively we emigrated from the UK. So I always felt a bit of an outsider when I came back to the UK because I didn't really understand how this country is quite different from Europe, and I can see Europe's flaws. I'm not stupid about it. I can see that it's very corrupt and very badly run in many places, and there are all sorts of problems. But broadly speaking, I'm quite sort of. I'm certainly not Europhobic.
So you thought you were on sort of Team Cameron?
No, I was on to. Well, no, I thought I was on to. No,
well, he was sort of Eurosceptical.
He's sort of the same.
He was, always...
My view on Europe was very similar to Dave's, and I do say this in the book, which is that I thought we should lean into Europe. I thought we should have more agency there. I felt that the attitude of Britain towards Brussels was a bit sort of. A bit too gung ho and probably also a bit just alienating. And I felt that if we could find some ways through, that we'd have more influence, which was really what you need to have. And I remember Michael and I went once on holiday to Antwerp. I would recommend it for a weekend break. It's very lovely. Lots of antique shops and nice beer. And I remember sort of vaguely fantasizing about, maybe Michael could go and work in Brussels and he could be sort of Cameron's man in Europe, and I could sort of wander around and the children could speak French and my mother could come and stay. But that was not to be.
But from the book, it seems you didn't even really realise how Eurosceptic Michael was.
No, I didn't actually, because he never sat down and talked. But I think the thing about Michael's Euroscepticism is that it's not cultural; it's purely intellectual. Michael. Why else would he marry someone like me? Who's kind of quite sort of, European, really, and he loves going to France, and it was very his. I think his objection was primarily sort of emotional in the sense that, his father did lose his job because of the fishing stuff, and he was adopted by a fishing family effectively in Aberdeen, and they were all fishermen one way or the other, all the sort of uncles and that lot. So they all had, they were badly affected by the fishing stuff. And so I think he felt a great deal of loyalty to his adoptive parents, and rightly so, because, as far as he was concerned, they were the ones who gave him a second chance. And so when it came down to the wire, he wasn't going to betray them, quite honestly. And I think loyalty, when you talk about loyalty, I think his prime loyalty really was to his family. And I don't have a problem with that. I understand that.
And how strong was the hand of Dominic Cummings, do you think, in persuading him of this? Because he was Michael's advisor before he was ever Boris.
Dominic came to work for Michael when he was in opposition, when they were in opposition. Yeah. So, when Michael was putting together the sort of reforms of education that he then went ahead with. So, they had a couple of good years sitting in quite a small office in Portcullis House, thinking about stuff. And he'd known him previously as well, because Dom had been involved in business for Sterling and other things like that. And I think Michael had huge respect for Dom's intellect, and Dom is incredibly intelligent and very analytical and very sharp, really, really sharp. He doesn't have great interpersonal skills. I think he would admit that he can be quite abrasive. And I think Michael always listens to Dom. I think he always does.
So he would have been influential.
Yeah, hugely influential, yeah.
Tell me what happened.
And Dave didn't like Dom right from the start. So
yeah, he stopped him being Michael's special advisor when he made him education secretary.
Well, he tried to, yes. And eventually then he relented, but said, you've got to keep him under control, which Michael then failed to do.
So tell me what happened when this came to a head with David Cameron and you.
Well, it's sort of, it was a slow, long, painful process of things just getting more and more awkward. And then there was a birthday party, Andrew Feldman's 50th. Andrew Feldman was the treasurer of the Tory party, lovely man, very nice guy. And he was having a birthday party for his 50th, and we were invited. And I said, I don't think we should go, because we'd already got to, it was sort of February 2000, and just before the referendum. 2016. So it was kind of, things were a bit tense. So I thought, better not go, stay away from it. Anyway, various people said, no, please come. So, okay, so I went. And then, as luck would have it, I ended up going up in the lift to the venue with Dave and Sam. And Dave was really angry at that point. I think he'd really just had enough. And it was unlucky, because that was the day that I wrote an article in the Daily Mail trying to explain, in a sort of pathetic, me trying to make everything okay sort of kind of way, why this was happening, why Michael was doing what he was doing. And it had the opposite effect. I think it just enraged him. And I think it also enraged Samantha, because A, she didn't think I should write about it, and B, she didn't like the Daily Mail. So going up in the lift, Dave said to me, you've got to get your husband under control. There was some swearing, but I won't swear on the podcast. You've got to get your husband under control. And I sort of went, okay, I don't know how to do that. And then I went for dinner. And then at the end of dinner, when I got up to leave, which I did quite early, Sam had a bit of a go, which was reported as us sort of having a kind of EastEnders style
You've not
fight.
said what she actually said, have you?
Well, I can't actually remember because I was so upset. When things happen and you're very, very, very upset. The blessed sponge of amnesia has wiped the exact words from my brain, but it was words to the effect of A, how dare you write a piece about us in the Daily Mail? B, why are you working with the Daily Mail? C, why is your husband trying to destroy my husband? All of that stuff, which, is completely understandable, really, when you think about it.
And that was deeply upsetting for you.
Well, of course. I mean, yes, because not only did I feel really upset because my friend who I really liked was angry with me, I also felt guilty because I thought that if I had handled the situation somehow better and had not been quite so sort of useless at negotiating, trying to navigate this really difficult situation, if I'd been better at doing that, then we probably wouldn't have got to this stage.
Why was it your job to negotiate? I mean, this was your husband's political choice.
I know, but I just someone had to do it, right? And no one was doing it. And I don't know why. I think I was paralyzed by sort of confusion and indecision and just pulled in a lot of different directions. And I wanted to support Michael and I understood his motives, but I really liked Dave and Sam, really wanted to carry on being their friend and really didn't want to upset everybody. But then in the end, I just ended up upsetting everybody.
Were you a bit seduced by
Yes, of
the
course.
court of the Camerons?
So glamorous and fabulous. Yes. I mean, Dave is one of those people who just glides through life. He's like a sort of James Bond figure. He's very, very, he's never shaken and all of that stuff. Or is it shake? I don't know anyway, but you know what I mean. He's quite a sort of, he's at ease with himself and in the world. And Sam is a sort of, she's just great fun and very very kind, but also just kind of all the things that I never was, quite sort of cool, quite posh, pretty, blonde, thin, good at yoga, all the stuff that I slightly would like to be, but never quite managed.
I think the Standard said it was a girl crush.
Yeah.
Was it a girl crush?
Yeah, I think it was a girl crush. Yeah, I think so. It's okay to have girl crushes, right?
Yeah, and very common. But I mean, but a bit schoolgirly maybe.
Yes, I mean, I think that I was always, I talk about this a bit in the book, I was never the popular girl at school. I was bullied at school. I was geeky. I was bookish. I used to look at people like Samantha and think I wished one of them would be my friends. And then when one of them was my friends, I was just really excited,
And desperate not to lose it.
Of course, yeah. So it's it's a little bit sort of Heathers. Remember that film Heathers?
Yes.
Yes. Although I didn't blow up the school.
But when you look back at yourself, sort of crushing on Sam Cameron, what do you think? Do you think it was entirely understandable, or do you think it was a bit silly?
Probably a bit silly, no? What do you think?
I mean, you can look at it a number of ways, can't you? You can either say, well, I understand why that happened, given everything you said about your childhood, but also maybe it was a bit immature.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you write a memoir, you've got to be honest about yourself. There's no point in writing a memoir going, and here I am, and I was right about everything, and aren't I fantastic? Because no one is interested in that.
Yeah.
It has to be a self-reflection, and it has to be warts and all, and it has to be my mistakes. I mean, that's why the picture on the cover is a woman face planting, because this is a book about all them. I mean, I'm really the worst person in the book. I'm the person who's made the mistakes, and I've tried to be honest about it. And so some of it is really embarrassing, but isn't that just life? Don't we all just make terrible mistakes? And the key thing is to try and learn from them, right? So yeah, I think back in the day, yes, I was very entranced by them and their lifestyle, and very I felt kind of very special to be part of that group. I say to be Sam's friend was a very special thing, and yeah, so being kind of cast out was it was like you're suddenly not in the gang anymore, and that I found that quite tricky.
The political consequences, as you say, were huge.
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
Brexit, and you've ended up being incredibly critical of David Cameron, haven't you? I mean,
Just for that moment in his career, yes.
What,
for
of
that
walking
particular,
away?
yes. I mean, I'm not critical. I don't really criticize him in any other way in the book in terms of his politics. I think actually he was quite a good prime minister up until that point. But I think walking away,
if sort of born to lead Etonians who kind of
all of that.
loosely stride through government,
but there's
is
nothing.
your thing.
I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? But I think in terms of that moment, I think that was a bad moment because I think it precipitated the sort of proper psychosis of the Tory party, which, from which it has not recovered and may never recover. And, it was a moment of, if he had just stayed, if he'd come out that morning and said, look, I'm really upset about this. This is not the result that I wanted. But, I am your prime minister. I did call this referendum. I did, in effect, start this fire. So I need to try and put it out. And I will remain and try and effect a smooth transition. I think things might have been quite different. Do you know what I mean? And I think because he left, then that sort of was the schism. And that was what created the chaos.
But what is it, do you think, that you didn't see early on in life about what politics would do? What was the misjudgment, if there was?
I think that I just didn't understand the world. I mean, I was never really in politics. I was never a political journalist. I was a sort of, I was an arts journalist, really. That was my thing. I liked, the theatre and all of this kind of stuff. And I didn't really understand the world of politics particularly well. And my parents weren't very political. I didn't grow up in a political family, so I'm just not really from that world. So it was really alien to me. I couldn't really understand it at all for a while. It took me a long time to get to grips with it.
I mean, obviously, Michael Gove he drew a huge amount of criticism. Lots of people hated him. And in a world of social media and online criticism, you're absolutely in the firing line.
Totally, yeah.
You as well, because of your job at the Daily Mail, draw your own fire. And you were supporting...
It's funny, though. You see, I write the same articles at the Daily Mail that I used to write at the Times, and yet the response is completely different.
They're not quite the same, are they?
Well, they're quite similar. If you read back to some of my Times articles, they were quite punchy, and I used to write leaders as well. So it's fascinating, this sort of... the perception is
Daily Mail journalist is worse than Times journalist saying the same thing. But I mean, you got. So what's it like when you're in that place? And this is a position not of your choosing, but of your husband's, and you're getting all this hate.
Well, that's quite tricky. That is quite difficult. It's very difficult when the person that everybody thinks you are bears no relation whatsoever in your head to who you think you are. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a massive disconnect, and you get this strange sort of it's a disconnect. You feel like your persona is twisted out of shape, is the best way to put it. You feel very warped by everything. I suppose it's a sort of form of, maybe it's a form of dysphoria, when people look at themselves in the mirror, if you have an eating disorder, you see a fat person when you're actually perfectly normal size. I would think that I was a good person and a decent person, but actually, apparently I'm not. Apparently I'm a witch. So that's difficult to deal with, I think.
Does it ever make you doubt your own judgment of yourself?
Well, sometimes it just makes me cry because it's just sad and upsetting. And it's particularly bad when you see it happen to someone you love, Michael, but also my children who've had it a bit, for various reasons at various points. And that's very difficult, actually, because you can, especially if it's a young person, I have a lot of sympathy for, young celebrities, young pop stars, like, people like Lola Young, who get sort of, this happens to them. And it's just, and they're like, well, what if I didn't, that's not who I am. Why are you saying those things about me? It's very, very hard, that sort of social media critique where people who've never met you, they've never been in a room with you, they've no idea who you are or where you've come from or what you've done, and they just have a judgment on you. You're like, well, sorry, I can't. It's difficult. It's really tricky. Yeah, psychologically.
Did you resent it?
Yes, I mean it's like there are stages. There are stages of it. The first stage is disbelief. You try and ignore it. Then you get very angry about it. Then you try to push back, which is always a mistake. Never try to push back because you always get yourself in even deeper. Then you become upset about it, and then you accept it. It's like it's a process, and you have to go through it. It's a process of brutalization that takes place, and it happens to. It doesn't just happen to politicians; it happens to anyone who's in the public eye. I think there's that sort of kind of running that gauntlet. But it's not easy. It's not easy. No.
I once did an interview with Damon Albarn, who told me that he had seen Michael across the road in W10 in North Kensington and had shouted at him and got, words to the effect of "Gove, you're an idiot." And he'd walked across the road and ended up spending half an hour talking to him.
Having a chat with him, yeah. I mean, my son in the book talks about going to football games with his father, people just hurling abuse at him. And, for an 8-year-old to see that, it's quite tricky. It's like you're trying to work out where you are in the world. Not that, again, no one will feel any sympathy, but it is, in your own work, in your own sphere, it's quite a big thing.
I mean, you know that people don't feel sympathy, don't you? So, I mean, so.
Of course, no, of course, no.
So what's that like? I mean, do you just feel like nobody knows?
No,
nobody out there really understands. What you have
to understand is there comes a point, at some point, and I talk about it in the book, where you cease to be human. And you're making a category error if you think that people are going to still treat you as though you were a human. You are no longer human. You are simply a sort of target. And you're either a target for the people who hate you or hate your husband or hate the newspaper that you work for, or, just hate you because you've got a funny nose or whatever, or your eyes are the wrong color, whatever. It's just, you're just not human anymore. You're just a kind of focal point for their frustrations and anger. And it makes it easier if you just submit to it, I think, generally. And Michael and I used to have this argument all the time, because in the beginning I used to get upset and I would try and fight back, and I would try and sort of make the case and all of that. And he would be just like, there's no point, Sarah.
Why did you go along with supporting Brexit, given you weren't really a Brexiteer? Was that just out of loyalty to your husband?
Yeah, really, because
that was the political wife bit?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so. Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And because, I mean, you remember Boris Johnson said that he'd played out the arguments for both Remain and Leave, and he'd written them down. And I really identify with that, because I make sense of the world by writing things down. That's how I get my thoughts in order. So if I don't know what I'm going to do about something, I'll often write a list of pros and cons, And so I think I was in a similar position to Boris, which was that, I could see the pros and I could see the cons, and I could see the advantages and the disadvantages, and I could see the, but what weighed it for me was the fact that Michael was so determined. And so, I supported him.
And was it right to do that?
What, to support Michael?
To support your husband. Is that what a political wife should do?
I think, yes. I think that you have to be a partnership. I think you have to be on the same page. Otherwise it just doesn't work, because it's such a tricky world. It's so difficult. There are so many knocks and things that happen to you. I think you need to be on the same page. Otherwise it's very hard. So,
But it didn't work anyway, I suppose. So.
No, but I think for Michael, Michael and I had particularly difficult pressures, because if you think of it, there was a lot that went wrong, and there's a lot of things that happened subsequent to that, and there are other factors as well. So, but I think probably if that Brexit moment hadn't happened, if Dave hadn't done the referendum, and if we just I think we probably wouldn't have ended up getting divorced. I think I can't say, obviously, because who can say? But I think it would have been easier. I think there wouldn't have been that sort of,
because those pressures wouldn't have been there.
Yeah, the pressures wouldn't have been there. Yeah.
So does that make you resent politics and hate it?
I mean, hate would be a very strong word. I just I don't have any illusions about it anymore. No, I don't know. But I'm not that sort of person anyway.
I mean, I said at the beginning it wrecked your life. Is that overstating it? Or did it wreck your life?
Well, it's sort of, I mean, it's yes, in aspects of mine, definitely, yes. I mean, it's, well, I suppose maybe derailed my life would be a better thing to say, because I wouldn't say my life is wrecked.
Do you think people should go into politics then, having seen it? I
think yes, because we need better people in politics. We need good people in politics. Politicians should be paid more. They should be, people should understand that it's the hardest job, and that, it's such an important job, because politics is people's lives. I mean, even if you don't feel it necessarily, everything that happens in your life is because of a political decision.
Because that's one of the other criticisms, I think, of that whole court of Cameron, isn't it? Which is that it felt like you were all playing at it, that it was fun.
Yes, Michael wasn't playing. Michael was very serious about his reforms, really serious about his reforms.
But the others were.
I don't know. I can't really speak for them. But no, for them it was. Well, I mean, there was an element of it being a game, in the sense that it was a game that needed to be won. Do you see what I mean? It wasn't a game in the sense that it was just fun and games. It was that they were deadly serious about winning it.
Yeah, but it's that whole sort of born to rule thing, isn't it? That this is what you do. You go to Oxford, you go into politics, you become prime minister, you run the country for a bit, you go off, make loads of money. And
possibly,
you might have a sort of patrician view of helping people along the way.
Yeah. But
it's not.
There was a little. There is a sense. There is, I think, a sense of entitlement there. But I don't think it's malicious, and I don't think it's necessarily conscious. I think it's a bit unconscious, because I think when you grow up in that world where that is the path that's set for you, those are the things that you do. Those are the benchmarks. You go to the right school, you go to the right university, you have the right connections, your friends are the right people. That's just your world. That's just your reality. So you don't really think of it in those terms. It's just what you do. Do you see what I'm saying? Whereas if you're someone like Michael and you come from a very different sort of starting point, adopted child, Aberdeen, fishing family, etc., and you get into this world, then it's a different, there's always that thing of, do I really belong here? Am I welcome? Should I be here? Am I worthy to be here? I need to prove myself. I need to earn my position here, and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's probably the difference that we're talking about.
There's this section in the book about your breakup, which is when you moved into the new house.
So many people have mentioned this.
Well, I suppose it's because you've only given so much, and quite rightly. Why should you tell every secret about your marriage? But this is a bit about the breakup that you've laid out, which is that he didn't want to unpack his books, and he didn't take part in the move, and left it all to you. And I suppose that was the indicator that he wasn't in this anymore.
Yes, I mean, we both reacted to the sort of trauma, if I can use that word. It's probably a bit too dramatic, but we both reacted to what happened differently, and we went in very different directions. And I just wanted to run away as fast as possible from politics and from that world. And I realised that it was that the time that we had was over. I understood that it was an ending. And, we lived very close to the Camerons, and in a part of the world where all of those people live and exist. And I thought, we just need to move and start again, And Michael went the other way, and he just wanted to hunker down and regroup and go back in, as it were. And we moved house, and I thought it would be a kind of new beginning, and it wasn't.
Beginning of the end.
It was kind of the beginning of the end, yeah.
I mean, having gone through all of this,
I think a lot of people who've gone through breakups will recognise that, not those particular circumstances, but a similar set of circumstances, perhaps.
I mean, you've laid out these two sort of very personally painful aspects of your life. Has that changed at all the way you want to write as a columnist? Because you are a punchy, critical columnist who has a go at people. It's why you're so controversial on the Daily Mail. It's why you joke about being a Wednesday witch. Does it make you want to be nicer?
I am quite nice in most of my columns, actually, just that most people don't read them. They just think they read them. They read the headline or they look at the picture. I mean, I'm very, the person I'm most critical of, in many cases, is myself. And the other thing to remember is that people are incredibly hard on me. So, when people are very hard on you and never give you the benefit of the doubt, then it's not, it's critical. I live in a critical environment, and my job is to analyze situations and, events, and to say what I think about it. And I always just say honestly what I think about it.
Is it still comfortable doing that, though?
Well, sometimes I will say things that people think are completely weird. Like, I'll say I don't think Meghan Markle is the problem here, or, all the things that I say. And also, don't forget, I write an awful lot. So there's just a lot out there. But
so is there a drive there? I mean, are you pushed to have
the mail? No. The most common phrase that I get told is, "You must write what you want to write."
Because
I'm not.
Am I wrong to have noticed a slight change in what you're writing? Because you started writing about your own health and Ozempic and all those sorts of things a bit more.
I mean,
a bit less of the sort of.
I think
having a go at celebrities.
I mean, well, having a go at celebrities is. I don't know. I think that's the kind of. There's a certain tradition of that in British newspaper publishing.
It's horrible, isn't it?
And it's part of the job. But what I would say is that I think
But should it be part of the job? That's
what, having a go at celebrities.
Yeah, isn't it just mean?
I mean, okay, let's be real. The worst thing that was ever written about me, right, was written by a journalist. He's a comedian actually, Stuart Lee, in The Guardian. Actually, it was The Observer, but now that's basically The Observer. And he said that. When David Cameron was at university, he allegedly put his penis into a dead pig. And then he wrote that when Michael Gove did something arguably worse, which is that he put his penis into a Daily Mail journalist. Okay, so that's what he said. I mean, it was a bit ruder than that. I'm not going to say. So, that's the kind of stuff that gets said about me. Okay, which is fine. You think that if that's a joke for you, that's great. But I don't think me saying I'm not sure that dress suited, I don't know, whoever it was, is on par with that. I really just don't. And everyone thinks that The Guardian and Observer is the nicest newspaper in the world, and everyone thinks, but there is plenty of unpleasantness around in newspapers, and it's not just in the Daily Mail.
Know, absolutely, and I agree. But I just wonder how you feel about unpleasantness now, because you've clearly been on a journey personally.
Yeah, of course. But I think I think it's okay to have a sort of considered opinion about people, in public life. If you're in public life and people don't feel any sympathy for politicians because they choose that existence. I do feel I am quite sympathetic actually towards celebrities. I talked earlier about younger celebrities like that who are young and immature and therefore not really, they probably don't know how to cope with things. But there are some people who are perfectly grown up and perfectly capable of doing.
It's a fair game.
Kind of, yeah.
I've also heard how you shrug off the criticism, and I'm not sure I'm totally convinced. Because what you've written about, I suppose, is about painful childhood and criticism and all that kind of stuff. And clearly, you still face a lot of criticism now. That some of it is very difficult. So you don't really just ignore it, do you?
No, of course not. But no one, I mean, I'm sure Donald Trump in his darkest hour has a bit of a boo, if he's done something wrong. I mean, we're all human at the end of the day. You can't sort of say, oh, it doesn't affect me. Of course it affects me sometimes. I just think you have to be, the most important thing, I think at the end of the day, is to try and be as authentic as you can be. Because I think authenticity is something that's, not something you get very often in the world, is it? Because everything is, Instagram, we're all filters and, airbrushing and all that kind of stuff, but I think... And
you write what you think.
Oh, I do write what I think. Even if what I think is annoying or cross-making, I still write it.
I mean, do you think Michael Gove is authentically him? Because he has lots of ways of protecting himself. Funny. I mean, I say this as something, I knew Michael in his early 20s.
Yeah.
And then I sort of stopped knowing him when he became a politician.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he kind of dumped all his journalism friends. And so I recognise all the sort of the tics that he has to kind of hide what he really is.
Yes, I think I think one of the difficulties perhaps that he had in being married to me, other than the obvious drawbacks, is that he's a very guarded person, different in that respect. I am the other way. I'm an inside out person. He's an outside in person.
And do you think that hampered him politically in terms of being popular?
I think possibly, yes, because I think a lot of people never really saw the authentic Michael, who's actually, you probably know from having known him in his 20s, quite a laugh, quite clever, interesting, funny, mischievous, all of those things. And I think that, politics slightly paralysed that side of him a little bit, I think, because he felt that he had to present a certain, front.
And just finally, I mean, I think, one of the breakups we didn't mention is the breakup between you and politics. Do you want to be back there? Do you want reconciliation with all of these breakups?
It's funny, isn't it?
If Sam Cam rang you tomorrow and said, come back and be friends, would you?
Of course, but I think it's very unlikely, especially after I've written this book. But I think there's a sort of element of Stockholm syndrome, isn't there, with me and politics, which is that, the problem is it drives me around the bend, but I also do now understand, and I am quite linked. We have a trauma bond, politics and I. That together us, we're sort of handcuffed together on some terrible sort of sinking ship. Yes. So and
so for all of those three things, is there a source of a desire to get back together?
With me and politics?
Politics, the Camerons, Michael Gove.
No. I think that ship has probably sailed, but I think all those ships have probably sailed. But I think politics is something that so having started on this journey, not even slightly interested in politics, I am now quite fascinated by it. And I am fascinated by the people in it and the dynamics and the way it affects people and how it works. And, I just wish it could be better, I mean, I don't think I can fix it, but I wish it could be better. And I have some ideas about how it could be better. But I know that thinking you can, you can actually make a difference or fix politics is a sort of fool's errand. So, but it doesn't stop me being interested and always fascinated by what's going on. And
politics isn't a fool's errand yet.
I mean, is it? I don't know. Arguably, this is a whole other discussion. Probably, you should probably do your own podcast on this. But arguably, the power doesn't really lie with the politicians anymore, does it? Arguably, it lies with the people who run the social media websites and the Elon Musks of this world. Presumably, they make most of the decisions about, what news we consume, what information we consume, how it's spun, how it's framed, how it's presented. What are politicians? They're just people. These are great, huge organizations that have incredible influence and reach in people's lives, and in a way that, it's a stealth thing, isn't it? And it's fascinating. We stand on the cusp of a lot of very serious changes, don't we? I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Is politics? Is it fit for purpose anymore? Look at America. Does it work? I don't know. Does democracy work anymore? Do people get what they need from it? I'm not sure they do. These are all interesting and important questions for our time.
Sarah Vine, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
That's the Fourcast. Until next time, bye-bye.